Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So nice to have you dialing in, joining NASCA. We're the National Association of State Chief Administrators, coming this afternoon with another installment of our top 10 priorities for state chief administrators. And we're excited to have you with us today. As you're dialing in, make sure you rename yourself so we know who's on with us today. Drop your LinkedIn information or your Twitter information into the chat. If you've got questions for our panelists today, please make sure you drop those in chat as well. We would love to connect with you, both with your colleagues here on today's call as well as after. Please make sure you do connect with NASCA on all of our social channels and stay up to date with us. But we're thrilled that you're joining us today again for another Top 10 national webinar. We've got an exciting group of panelists that will be with us here today, talking a lot about budget reductions and cost optimization. Certainly something that all of our state governments are looking at, ensuring that we're taking whatever strategies and steps necessary to reduce cost, to combine processes, looking perhaps at shared services. We've got a great opportunity to chat today about different mechanisms that states are using. Maybe look at some obstacles that we're not aware of and really just digging into this whole concept of budget reduction. I'm Pam Goins, Executive Director here at NASCA, and again, we're excited to have you with us here today. Wrapping up, almost coming to the very end of our Top 10 series for 2021. It won't be long, we'll be unveiling the 22 Top 10 priorities and really digging into what's happening in state government operations across the country. But today we've got three excellent panelists with us, and let me introduce them to you. We have Kristen Cox, who is an author, a former Utah State Government employee and owner of Kristen Cox Consulting. We have Jeff Plante, who is a partner with KPMG. And then also Matt Singh, who is the director of the Nebraska Center of Operational Excellence. A great mix of public and private panelists coming together to share their thought leadership with NASCA members today. But let's get started with a poll. We love these polls, which gives us an opportunity to gauge what's happening in your states, to give you an idea of what some of your colleagues are experiencing as well. So Tammy, will you tee up our first poll question? Number one, would you say that within your own agency or department, you're engaging in one or more of the following? You can select all that apply. You're looking at manual processes that could be automated. You're taking a look at your legacy systems that are causing some delays. Perhaps there's a lack of outsourcing, ineffective use of personnel or duplicative tasks, lack of appropriate policies and procedures to define those tasks, and then also overly complex or convoluted practices. Check any or all of these that might be occurring in your state systems. Really, again, looking at within your agency or department, do you engage in any of these? And again, this is going to give us a great foundation for seeing what's happening across the country. So we'll give you just another second or two to respond to one of these six or all. Perhaps you're having challenges across the board. So Tammy, will you show us our results? Oh, interesting mix here. So 31% saying that the manual processes perhaps could be automated. 23% are having some legacy system issues. No one really is concerned about outsourcing. It's interesting. Small percentage, 8%, looking at ineffective use of personnel. We've got about another 8% looking at a lack of appropriate policies and practices. And then tied for the number one, 31% are saying overly complex or convoluted practices. Interesting. One more poll for you to look at before we get started here today. So our second poll, we'll have Tammy bring that up for us, and then we'll kick off with our panelist. As she's pulling that up, I'll just have you be thinking about this question. Is your state or company actively engaged in various strategies to reduce cost and be more efficient? And again, you can select any or all of these that might apply. So within your own state or company, are you actively engaged in strategies to reduce cost, ultimately leading to efficiency? So are you looking at deliberate operational excellence strategies, perhaps innovative practices at the enterprise level, individual agency or department analytical tools, or clear incentives to drive efficiency and effectiveness. So again, select 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those if you're looking and thinking about your own state or company. All right, Tammy, let's see what these results look like. Oh, interesting mix here again. 75% are saying that you're looking at deliberate operational excellence strategies. That'll be interesting as we go into today's conversation. 69% are saying innovative practices at the enterprise level, looking across the state government operational system. 25% saying agency or department analytical tools, and then a small percentage, 6%, saying incentives to drive efficiency and effectiveness. Very, very interesting. Well, I appreciate you all participating in our polls, and I think this is really important for us to kind of get a foundation for today's conversation as we really dig into budget, operational efficiencies, effectiveness, how we can really look to control costs and reduce the impact, negative impact to our budgets. So now, Matt, I want to start out with you. Share a little bit about the work that you're doing there in Nebraska. And I will have to say publicly, I had an opportunity to be with you at a recent event that was amazing. 300 operational excellence representatives from across the state of Nebraska. Governor Ricketts just showing his passion for the work around OE. But tell us a little bit about the impetus for the Center for Operational Excellence and really what you all are seeing in the state of Nebraska.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before that, just to let you know, we just got our customer survey results from the summit itself, and it was upper 80s customer satisfaction for first event. So thank you again to NASCA, and thank you to Pam to be a part of that. We could not have done it without your support. So thank you. In Nebraska, we have a pretty structured program. Back when Governor Ricketts took office, about 2015, one of his major goals was to make Nebraska more effective, efficient, and customer focused. And one of the first things he did was to create a hub that could help accomplish those goals. So even though it's an overarching strategy in his administration with policies and so forth, he wanted an actual center location of people that could focus on it full time. So he created the Center of Operational Excellence. I was one of the first strategic hires, came on board as the director, and we made some decisions early on as to what it was going to look like. And a quick plug here, if you haven't read it, there's a really cool case study that NASCA did in conjunction with Harvard to create that shows all the details of how this Center of Operational Excellence Nebraska came to be. All the decisions, the change management, the crucial conversations, the tough moments, all of it's really well articulated in there. So please check that out. It is somewhere in the NASCA database if you get a chance. And one of those early decisions was we decided to go with the Lean Six Sigma. There's a lot of valuable methodologies out there, but we chose to go with Lean Six Sigma. And Lean Six Sigma has what's called the belt system. So some of you are probably unfamiliar with that. It's very similar to like judo or karate. There's different color belts that represent different levels of skill set and experience. So white belts is intro in the state of Nebraska. It's for all state teammates. Yellow belt is for middle managers, focusing on things like 5 whys and basic Lean Six Sigma tools. Green belts are full-time practitioners that do continuous improvement projects, redesign projects, special facilitation, strategic meetings, all this stuff, full-time positions. Executive green belts is training for the governor's office, cabinet members, administrators, directors, deputy directors, officers. So kind of those people that have control over the budget. And then we have black belts who work directly with me to do enterprise projects that impact the entire state. So if we're doing something it directly involves 30, 40, 50 agencies, the Black Belt program helps to kind of tie everybody together and to have a unified front to move forward. We also have certified lead leaders, which are, it's kind of like additional training for yellow belts, those middle managers who want a little bit more. We do have the certified lead leaders. So some really cool examples of projects we've got to do over the years. We've helped with the financial reporting systems for the state to make sure their accuracy. We helped extensively with the COVID-19 response, and there's a really cool video we created that I believe NASCA also has a copy of that and has sent out. Do check that out, and not just shameless plugging on my program, but I think it's a great descriptive picture of how things like operational excellence and continuous improvement aren't just for process, it's for overall responses or organizational needs. So please do check that out. We've helped with creating a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs trying to start businesses, so they can find all their paperwork in one spot versus 20 different web pages. So we've got an opportunity to help with a lot of different things. I'll end it on results. We have some pretty significant results. So Governor Ricketts started this back in, I believe 2015 is when he came on board. And I was hired early 2016. In 5.5 years, we have done over 600 projects, over 600,000 hours of payroll have been documented and saved. We have a very rigorous documentation process, also highlighted in that Harvard NASCA case study. We have over 21,000 yellow belts. We have over 5,000 yellow belts, over 300 executive green belts, over 30 green belts, over 6 black belts, and over 300 certified lean leaders. And over $80 million of verified savings, 30 million, which is this year alone. So it took a little bit of momentum to get going, and NASCA was with us the whole way, but we are definitely in a good spot now where we're looking at those cost efficiencies throughout the state.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think that's so telling, again, to be able to be there with Governor Ricketts as he was sharing this, but $80 million in savings alone from the work of the Center of Operational Excellence. Very, very impressive. So Kristen, I want to bring you into this conversation. You've been doing work, again, not only in Utah, but across the country. How are you seeing initiatives like Center of Operational Excellence really leading to these budget reductions and savings across the country?
Well, first, kudos to Matt, because it does take time and consistency to make these things scale, to create a culture where this is part of what people do. Operations is its own field of study, and sometimes it's just not embedded in how we promote or hire people. So kudos to Matt for really embedding this in the system there. I think it's picking up a lot more traction. And I think what's really interesting too is seeing different places where the operational teams are being housed. Sometimes in budget offices, so operations and budgets are connected. Sometimes in, administrative services division. So where they pop up is also very interesting. A lot of mixture there, but I think we're learning a lot of lessons from my perspective on what synergies tend to help scale this much quicker and sustain it over time.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I think that's really helpful as well. Jeff, let's bring you to the conversation also, thinking about the work that Nebraska is doing. They've really worked effectively to bring some of those services together. I know that's work KPMG is doing around shared services. And in just a moment, we'll ask you to share a little bit more about the state collaborative. But after hearing what's happening in Nebraska, how are you seeing this concept of a shared services model really work across the country?
We're seeing clients and just states and large localities, having different levels of success. And one of the things that reading the report earlier from Matthew was how you really took it on yourself. And, I think there's various methods. I think a lot of people bring in consultants, but, one of the things I was impressed with how Nebraska did it was they led it, which helped with the change management. I liked how you did the different belt levels, got organizational leadership totally focused, right? If you don't have sponsorship. And, that's one of the things we see with different varying levels of success at our clients. When you have sponsorship, the sponsorship is looking at what's getting measured, and you have good KPIs. We're really seeing that. The other thing I thought was interesting when I looked at Nebraska's, initiative was they initially had a bunch of projects and they scaled it back and said, let's focus on things we really can get done. We can't do it all, right? You can't boil the ocean. You all work in administrations that want to get things done before the next cycle. If they're running, they want to get a lot done, but is it better to spread the peanut butter, or is it better to really focus on a few things and do them really well? And obviously with the cost savings you just mentioned, obviously it worked, but I really think your model where you did it yourself is not one you see a lot. And I think a lot of states and entities can learn from that, because I think, we always say, and I'm a consultant, so, it's do it with the client, not to the client. And I think you actually did it to yourself, which is really hard to do. And and how do you position expertise to help you drive it, especially now where a couple things we're seeing, right? With loss of institutional knowledge through retirements and people transitioning in and out, and just organizational will and change. We'll talk about later, but change resistance is one of the biggest things. So now I think those are the two challenges I saw, that you figured out a way to get through it. And I think in any initiative, right, we always talk about people, process, and technology, but it's generally the people that are the biggest difference and can move the initiatives. So that's what I saw.
Thanks, Jeff. And Matt, if I can just have a follow-up with you very quickly. Again, one of the things that stood out to me at the Nebraska Summit was the passion from leadership, from the top all the way through the system. And part of the day that we spent together was looking at the change. What happens when leadership does change? Any golden nuggets you'd like to share around leadership change, sustainability, knowing that governments may change, leadership may change, what that might mean for the center going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. If you read that case study, the NASCA case study, it's a great representation of our early days when we really got this thing started. It had some strong currently has strong sponsorship with Governor Ricketts, has strong sponsorship with Director Jackson, the head of administrative services. Many of the members call me on the weekend just to check up and see if there's anything that they can do to support my efforts. So it does have strong support, and I think that was needed to really drive it as fast, succeed as much as it did initially. But and up front, the point was to really prove the business case, prove this stuff works, prove it can be done. Like Geoffrey was talking about, prove it can be done internally, prove we have the capacity and bandwidth, and we did that. About 3 years ago, we transitioned to focusing very heavily on the sustainability of the program. And there's several actions we took to ensure that. And I'll also, because of time, I won't go into all the specific details we did to ensure that. But what I will say, some high level stuff is, how do we create value for the people using this stuff? So when the Ricketts administration is gone, why would people still want to interact with us? Well, those who have done projects with us understand we can make their job easier. That was not always the case. Up front, they didn't know that. Now they know, hey, we can make that problem, we can fix it. You've tried to do it internally, it didn't work. We can do it free of charge. So it really proving that value and helping them see what we can do, the power of Lean Six Sigma and the power of operational excellence. The other thing is to include them. We don't want to be this little center that's all by itself away from the people. They are the center of operational excellence. Our 300 executive green belts that span across all the deputy director roles, the direct role administrators, the officers, they're the next cabinet members. They're the future leaders of the state. We want to continue to reach out to them and engage them and support them and see how they can continue to utilize what we do to help them do what their job requires of them. So those are some of the big things for sustainability. We're very confident that after the Ricketts administration, as we carry over into the next administration, that the Center of Operational Excellence will continue to provide support for the state in whatever capacity it requires.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So Jeff, I want to bounce back over to you. We just had a wonderful opportunity to meet with several states a couple of weeks ago in a joint conversation again around this shared services model. But we really started to look at the concepts of innovation, professional development, workforce development, again, really under this umbrella of a shared services model. You want to share a little bit with our audience today about really where we're headed with that conversation?
Sure. Thank you. And I first want to just thank all the participants. We did 2 virtual sessions that had 6 different states and participants from there. We had 8 states in Rochester about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, for a total of 10 different states, of all sizes and from all over the country. So we really got some great input and some great insights, and there were a lot of commonalities. And we really looked at shared services and consolidations, professional development, and innovation were 3 of the big themes, right? And when you really look at, I'll just go through, shared services, 4 major areas, no surprises, right? Organizational, technology, workforce, facilities, and operations. But what's interesting was the conversation is definitely different than it was 18 months ago, right? And how different things accelerated, how you have to look at things differently. And the same thing as we're looking at in the private sector, it was just interesting. It's the same common challenges. How do you look at saving money, but more importantly, providing services in the same manner or better manner to both your constituents, but also your internal employees who are going to be working differently forever now. Hybrid is here to stay. I think, and obviously there's different challenges to that as we go forward, right? So I'll just start with organizational, shared services. How do we continually look at shared services? How can we do more, especially with technology, especially with the need that you don't have to be together like you used to? And, one of the things if you look at what Matthew did, it's an evolution. It never ends. You don't just do shared service, you set it up. I was talking to a client the other day, and they're like, now we got to take it to the next level on financials. Then we got to take HR and do more. There's really a lot you can continually do, and take the transactional processing and really put it in shared service. And then the people that are, say HR, that are closer to the agencies, they're the people who are really your HR specialists. And we would even say they would be shared services. It's just they may sit out with the agencies because they know union agreements and their various issues that are key to those agencies, but they can be shared across because they get common training. They're working under a common understanding of all the rules and regulations, and you have better compliance, and you probably handle situations much better, and you don't have inconsistencies between agencies. The biggest thing is you have the right tools and systems to do that. Can you do shared services remotely? I mean, how many times do you get a call from a call center, somebody they're really working at their house, or they're working in, various locations? That was interesting. And then as we'll talk about space more later, but why does everyone from one agency have to sit in the same spot together? And why can't they be commingled with other agencies and things like that, which came up? Technology, right? We've all seen, we're on remote technology right now, but, we saw the rollout much faster. I mean, our firm was going to put something out in December of 20, big teams rollout. They decided, nope, we got to get it out in April, and just don't try to make it perfect. And what we're finding is every week there's a new feature, there's a new different way to, add something, and just enable your people and keep making it better rather than try to, build the perfect solution and then put it out there. So we see a lot of that. Security is always concerned, both, technology security, but all, cybersecurity, and both physical security, right? Because now if you have people, you don't know where they're working, who's looking over their shoulder, is their laptop secure? We had clients where when they went to this, the clients that still had a lot of paper, they were working off workstations versus laptops, they struggled when the pandemic hit. Clients that had everybody on a laptop were, for the most part, paperless. Yeah, everybody had their struggles and just how to work and communicate, but they were much farther ahead. So that's one of the things we heard. And, just the physical security of even, there are documents now where people are working home. The workforce, what we're finding with the workforce is a few things. People kind of like this hybrid approach. They kind of like working at home. I have some clients that they're, and we heard it in the surveys and in the interviews, it was people are more productive in many cases. Hey, if I don't have to commute a half hour each way, I can just go to my kitchen and eat instead of, making lunch and bringing it, or going out to lunch. I can take calls while I'm getting some exercise even. People are way more efficient when they're committed to this. And we do see, though, that hybrid makes sense just for the social and mental well-being of people. I think you do need your people to get together. You do find that when they get together, there is the things that, the hallway conversations, the things that just don't happen when you get off a Teams call or a Zoom call, some of those things. So we do see that you can't go totally remote isn't as efficient and I'd say effective. Or the other thing we found with the workforce is, depending on your state rules, now you don't have to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Montpelier, Vermont, or Albany, New York. You can recruit people from farther distances that don't have to get into the physical workspace of those capitals that in the past was a barrier to recruiting. We're seeing it on the other side where the Googles and the Amazons, they're just letting people work wherever they want. So now you don't have to live in Silicon Valley or move to California. You can live in the middle of Kansas or Iowa and work and still have a Silicon Valley type job. And I think the states are going to have to adapt to that. I know there's been a long history of most people have to come in. Hey, we allow you so many remote hours. That's another area we really saw changing. Then facilities, we really see Tennessee was one, but others talking about taking out 1 million square feet of space. Think about the savings on that without changing how you're serving your constituents, because your constituents want to do a lot online, and you can really save the space for the things that you need to do physically with your constituents. So that was a big thing. Obviously, facilities, fleet was another thing, more pooling again. Do you really need vehicles for your teams like you used to? The other thing, on the converse, some of the risks that came up. Well, now somebody's working home all the time. Like, how does workers' compensation work? If they get hurt while they're home working during the day, right? That's a real, there's just other things that happen in the background that don't happen at work that, you have to just be careful. What does their work environment look like? Do they have screens in the back? So, whatever they have up in their houses and, art and stuff. It's amazing the HR stories you hear over the last year that you would never think of. And how can the assets, like I said before, like space, how can that be shared amongst many of the agencies rather than, the old, each agency has a building or they have certain floors on a building and that's just the way it is. So just going into a few of these, so for organizational, the key market trends we found is there is some outsourcing still going for certain things that maybe aren't core. We actually heard one of the things we heard is internal audit. Some of those other things where you need skills, you may have a core team and then you may augment your team with others. Planning, a lot more 5 to 10 year strategies on cloud, IT consolidation. Obviously the cloud enables a lot more remote work and a lot different work styles. And obviously KPIs, right? KPIs are important to understanding how things are being done. One of the impacts though is, and I brought this up before, was the institutional knowledge. And I think the days of, a kid coming in at 22, 25, staying for 30 years is probably not going to happen for states like it has, it used to happen. And one of the things is, how are you building that knowledge, understanding that people might leave and having the nimbleness to recruit and backfill. We saw it we see it in almost every project, right? Current leadership may not be open to change. Having the effective change management strategy about before, and data availability and tools. So having the manual process, how do you get to the data? How do you have the tools to really access the data? One thing we find is our clients have a ton of data, but do they have information, right? And how can they take that data and access it quickly and use tools that you don't have to be a technologist to really use, right? We all do, we're all probably Excel proficient, but when you really start getting to some of these advanced tools and things like that, and leadership expects answers quicker than they ever had. The public expects, you can't run the report 10 days after the month end, those type of things. Just going through technology, I think I mentioned most of these, but the market trends, again, legacy systems, we heard it loud and clear. We're out in Rochester. Some of the legacy systems that just make it so hard. How can you replace them? How can you maybe use some of the rescue plan funds to accelerate some of those projects? Obviously, cybersecurity is just becoming an increasing risk, and trying to constantly stay on top of it was a big trend. Automating and analytics, like I just talked about, and configurable apps. Now, we just don't want it on our laptop. Can we do it on the phone? Can we do it from anywhere, especially when we have a remote job like inspecting, things like that, regulators that have to go out, health inspectors, things like that. So a lot more remote technology. But some of the impacts, reduction in data centers. Data centers are very expensive, not just the space, but think about all the electricity, all the other things that now if you go to the cloud, you're reducing all those other costs, plus the security around them, et cetera. We're seeing some states are trying to go as fast as they can. Just compliance reporting obviously becomes an issue. Investing in resources. So the one thing is keeping your resources trained, and we'll talk about that in workforce, but technology is moving really fast. Regulations are starting to change a lot. So how do you train your people faster? And just in the workforce again, a couple of things we heard. We talked about the hybrid workforce, more virtual. Employees want more self-service. They don't want to have to go in and do a lot of paper. Learning and development, something we've done, but we heard it in our interviews, was leveraging things like LinkedIn for training. There's so much virtual training out there now. You don't need to develop your own training content other than for things that are very specific to your entity. We use it ourselves for a lot of things that are just technical training, whether it's project management of things, and then have internal training for things that are very specific to our business. And just what are the learning requirements and learning paths so that you show your employees that you're investing in them long term. So some of the impacts obviously are, what are the contractual, if you have unions, what are the contractual issues? You do lose some collaboration when you're remote. That's just a fact. But in other ways, you can get other people collaborating that may have been remote and could never get to the central office type thing. So there is some of that tax implications depending on where people are living versus commuting. So those things we found out. And again, I talked about facilities and operations, but we found this was an area, depending on leases, depending on who owned what kind of space, really a big trend for cost savings. How can you co-work among agencies? How can you hotel? Hey, I'm a state employee. I want to log in. I want to get an office in downtown, Harrisburg tomorrow for 8 hours. Boom. Okay, what's your level? Where do you need to be? What access do you need? And it tells you, where to be. No different than Marriott or Hilton. So kind of interesting that we're seeing where that smart building technologies to help with that, to help keep the cost of electricity down, things like that. Secure printing. Secure printing is a big one now because it's also a security issue. So if you can secure print, use your badge, you go to the printer, it prints off. The old days of going to the printer and finding 5 other people's things on the printer are kind of over. And just fleet, right? All fleets are moving more from gas and fossil fuel to electric. How do you maintain them? How do you have the charging stations and all those things in your facilities to deal with that? ESG is becoming a big issue and a trend that you're going to have to deal with. So how do you do that? So I think they're the major ones, Pam. And it's just some statistics I want to end up with. 80% of the organizations offer hybrid workplace model. 50% offered some kind of work from anywhere. Role-based approach used by organizations for defining workplace models. 70% of organizations have defined roles for remote working. 55% of the organizations plan to adjust compensation according to remote work locations. 61% of the organizations leverage digital collaboration tools. Obviously, there's going to be new office layouts. The days of the regular office with a door, there's going to be very few of those other than for probably kiosk type things for private conversations. Decrease in non-FTE related costs as a result of the virtual environment could be anywhere from 25 to 50%. And 54% of the organizations have specified a target date for employees to return to their offices in a flexible manner, which I think is, those dates are being very flexible as we see week to week. So that's where we are. We have one more virtual session to do, and then the goal is to wrap this up the next couple months and publish a report. Obviously, we're building the report as we go and add information to it. We were hoping to have this done, but the sessions have been so rich in content, and we've had some very high-level individuals who have been able to give us some great content. So we're looking forward to publishing this soon.
Great, thank you so much, Jeff. And we're excited about this collaborative project and getting all this information out to NASCA members. Now, let me just kind of pop back to Nebraska and the work that you're doing there. So Jeff just gave us a ton of different strategies, a lot of different things we're doing across the states. Share a little bit about this model of combining services, sharing services in Nebraska, maybe how you've seen an impact on your budgets.
Yeah, I think shared service model does have a lot of positive elements that we can focus on. I have a shared service team that reports to me, and it allows us to provide a higher quality of service for less money. And here's why. First off, if the alternative model is to have generalists at each agency who aren't necessarily highly trained on all the different topics because they're servicing all the needs. So let's say an HR specialist versus a series of HR generalists spread throughout the state. And so Well, I think what I've seen when we go to the shared service model, you have the experts can focus on providing the exact services that are needed, and they do it faster and more efficiently for all the customers because that's all they do. They do it full time. So the quality of the work's better, in my experience, because of that reason. And when the quality is better, that means there's less rework, there's less waiting, there's faster lead time. All these things which we know in operational excellence lead to reduced costs and savings. In addition, it generally takes less FTEs. So for instance, throughout the state of Nebraska, a lot of agencies have full-time PICs, process improvement coordinators, full-time practitioners in their agencies doing continuous improvement. And that makes a lot of sense, especially for the bigger agencies. And in fact, some of the bigger agencies have entire teams of process improvement people in their agencies. In my shared service, 3 people are able to service 7 to 9 different agencies simultaneously. 3 people, 7 to 9, because we did adopt the shared service model with those agencies, and they do this all day. So they're able to look at the synergies of not reinventing the wheel. Every time they attempt to help the agency achieve a goal, they very well may have done a similar project for another agency or one of their peers has. So I think those are the 2 basic considerations that go through my mind when thinking about shared services. The quality of the work generally goes up, which has cost savings associated with that. But the overall FTE count should drastically go down just because they do it full time. It's their expertise. You don't need as many actual warm bodies filling those seats.
Great examples, Matt. Thank you so much. And Kristen, I know you've got deep experience across the country. Again, not only from your seat that you had there in Utah, but what are you seeing across the country as far as some other strategies that state governments are using, and maybe some examples you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, shared services can really, really work. And Jeff mentioned some of the strategies. I think the caution is if it's done well, it can create the quality and the cost savings we want. If it's not, what we do is sometimes shift the cost and we don't save the cost, right? So you can get shadow IT shops because maybe you centralize IT and the agencies don't love it. And so there's still shadow IT costs. So I think it's really important in the variety of shared services. I was in the governor's office and ran that office of budget management for 8 years. So we saw a lot of benefits. We can see if it's not set up really, really well, and Matt pointed this out, high quality, shorter lead times, et cetera, you just can shift the cost. And figuring that out and doing the deep work that Jeff is thinking about and doing in his report to really understand how to not just create a shared service, but all the deep operational work that needs to happen, from how do you fund it, how do you have transparency so it's not too complex for the agencies to understand, and how do you really baseline where you are with current costs, the quality, the volume you can handle, so that you have a really compelling story to tell so that you can expand it, I think is also really important.
That's great, Kristen. Let's just stay with you. In your book, you've got this concept of the illusion of progress. Also, I've heard you talk about thinking big while acting small. Interesting concept. Would love to hear your thoughts maybe on some of the biggest mistakes that we make while trying to reduce costs, maybe share your thought leadership in that area.
Thank you. So I've worked for 3 governors and ran the Office of Management Budget, like I said, and we embarked on this journey many years ago. I've been doing this work since almost 2007, and I've learned a lot of things along the way of what works and doesn't work. Just our story, we saved about $400 million on labor costs alone. We have fewer employees in the state of Utah than we did back in year 2000. One way to look if you're bending the cost curve. But the costs are only one side of it. What's really important is that, are we getting better outcomes? Are fewer prisoners returning to the prison system? Are more kids getting what they need if they're in the child welfare system? So it's about the cost. And so these are the mistakes I've seen happen frequently in my own life and looking at other organizations. And then I'll just touch upon the first one a little more deeply. So number 1 is we treat all improvement opportunities the same. Number 2, we don't have a full grasp of what the causes of costs are. What are causing these costs, right? You can't see them in spreadsheets. That's why we integrated budget with operations, so you can understand what's happening in operations, because you're not going to see it in your budget spreadsheets. Number 3, we don't aim high enough and number 4, so I've had these out of order. I'm blind and I can't see my screen. And the last one is we confuse action with outcomes, right? We can all be really busy, but are we delivering significantly better outcomes for the taxpayer and the customer? And so let me just talk about this first one. We're all busy. We're bombarded with a million ideas. But in my mind, not all improvements are the same. And I think Jeff alluded to this. You know, we started with kind of improving everything, but we got really focused early on and looked at within each agency, what programs consist of 80% of the budget. And usually there was like 5 or 8 of them. And or what programs really impact lots of people. For example, DMV, the budget is not as big as Medicaid, but it impacts almost everyone in the state. So we got really focused early on what we call systems. And I want to make this distinction because one of the causes of cost is about how the different pieces in a system work together or don't well work together. And this is this one concept that is, I think, just huge if you want to make big shifts in your organizations. So this is a chart, simple, very simple, A, B, C, D, E. And while this is a very simple example, the principle here works the same as if I'm working in juvenile justice systems or I'm working in a business permitting system, right? Every system, which is basically a collection of parts, policies, resources, people that you need to achieve the real goal the customer wants, right? What does the customer, the taxpayer really expect from this? And all these parts come together. And it's really hard when you're working in it to see all the parts of the system. So here we have 5 people who have different functions. A can do 20 units an hour, B can do 16 units an hour, C can do 10, D, I think here it says 24, and E can do 18. And I can go about, and each one of these, if I talk to each person, they would give me an idea of how to improve the system. And there'd be lots of ways to improve A. And I could take A and I could improve A and make it 400% better. But the question is this system any better because of what I've done at function A? And we'll ask this question a lot and say, look, how much can this system produce at the end of an hour? And people will take up each individual part and add it up and average them out, and we'll get lots of different answers. But the reality is that the system can only produce as much as the constraint or the limitation can produce. Here it's C, right? It's C can only produce 10 units. So even if I can get A to produce 40 units, B still can only do 16, and then so C is only going to get 16 from B, but it can only work on 10. Now this is very simple here. In real life, it's not quite as apparent to us where we need to focus. And what my journey has been is that all improvement opportunities are not equal. And in fact, I can sometimes make things worse. If I were to set up a whole strategy to improve A and B, and I just overwhelmed C, I could really do damage to the system. And we see this in the prison system, healthcare, where we really maybe have a shortage of a shortage, which isn't always the case in bed space, let's say in hospitals. We can try to fix a lot of other issues, but we're missing where people are getting stuck in the system. And so this first thing of just thinking about the system and understanding that we have to focus our very limited time and attention. And this is just as important when we look at budgets in the state, right? So the big areas where most state budgets are being driven by are Medicaid, prison system, transportation, like building roads, right? These major elements are driving budgets in the state. And to tackle those, you've really got to look at it from the system perspective. You know, building a road requires contracting. It requires a lot of issues of flow and project management. And in that system, there'll be an area that is usually blocking the project from moving forward quickly. And if we want to tackle Medicaid, which is just consuming so much of state budgets, we still have to take a systems perspective on this. And it's not the individual improvement opportunities, right? This is what I mean, Pam, by think big, act small. Engaging the front line and letting their voice be heard is really important. And also giving them a lens to see how their part plays and impacts the bigger system so they understand what improvements need to happen. When we did this, for example, in juvenile justice services, we've been in like 230 major systems. When we just did juvenile justice services, we found this one space and all of the busyness of the system that had to be fixed. If that didn't fix, the kid did not get what the kid needed, so they would not return and they could be successful in the community. And we saw that and took a systems perspective. We could move resources around. We could bring $5 million up front to prevention. We could shift the right resources into detention with no new money. But we couldn't have done that if we hadn't taken a higher look at what all the different parts were. So all opportunities to improve. We can skip these slides because I won't have time. This is just an example of basically what we've done in environments like state mental health hospitals, how when you try to do a specific improvement on a process, you actually can't improve the system. So we'll skip those. We'll have those available for people. I want to end with this. There's this journey I've been on as I've done this work, and I'm, the older I get, the less I know. I'm not saying I have this all figured out, but my journey's been from moving from process improvement, which is nice and important, to looking at systems. And ultimately, the people we serve, the customers, the taxpayers, they're interested in the outcome the system produces, right? Did I get the business permit on time? Can I really show that as a state, we've been up the cost curve in big ways? Are we actually keeping more kids safe in the child welfare system, unifying families, et cetera? But even then, you move up and you can go into what we call an enterprise system. So in the prison system, there's correctional industries, there's medical, there's programming where they get GEDs, there's substance abuse, and each one of those you can improve. But when you go up a level and you even look at how do all those individual systems come together to really give inmates what they need when they need it so they don't return, which we've had a 600% improvement in that space. That took a lot of what we call enterprise, making all those systems work together. And that's hard work. It's a big synchronization issue, but it makes such a huge impact to get these limited resources to work well together. And finally, I always say, get your own house in order. When that works well, you can go outside to the broader ecosystem outside your agency, find touch points. But we have, in my mind, like I've said, been in so many systems, I have not found one yet that did not have significant and hidden capacity. And a lot of these operational tools help surface what is often invisible to us, where we can't see it in spreadsheets or policies or org charts. And Pam mentioned, I'll conclude with this idea of the illusion of progress. We can be very busy with new strategic planning and more reorganizations. And at the end of the day, though, if we're not solving the problem for our primary customer and we're not showing significant results, I think we've missed the mark. And we can be very busy without making big impacts for those we serve. So we get into the illusion of progress. Very busy, but we're not getting the results so that we all want. Everyone wants to make a difference. So I'll leave it with that. Lots more to say about the other mistakes and even on this one topic, but focus is huge in this space.
Great, Kristen, thank you so much. And again, I'm really intrigued about the elevator principle. We want to dig deeper into that, and we've got some more time. So we're coming relatively close to the end of our hour, but I want to go back to all three of our panelists and really think through how we might elevate, innovate, and scale a lot of the concepts that we've talked about today. So Matt, let me start with you, maybe individually in the state, and then we'll go over to Jeff, and then Kristen, more broad scale. But really, how do we innovate and scale these strategies so that we see more progress? Matt?
Yeah, first off, Kristen, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that. That was very informational, even jotting notes as you were talking. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Right off the bat, I got two things I would focus on when it comes to scalability to implementation. Chances are you guys are here to think through how can you take some of these ideas and actually apply them back in your agencies in your state. You're looking at, as Kristen was talking about, how do we get those bottom line results for our citizens, our constituents? And to that extent, I would say, as you're hearing these ideas, as you're hearing these concepts, everything from shared service models to Lean Six Sigma, to some of the different strategical elements that Geoffrey was talking about, my challenge to you would be to first understand the concept and then think about how it applies to your particular state, because it's not going to look the same state to state, and it's not going to look the same even within the state, agency to agency. So sometimes when people get involved in operational excellence and improvements and this kind of stuff, it's exciting. It's exciting to want to make a difference. It took a cultural change to get all these people on board, but let's make sure we think through how we can take this great idea and apply it specifically to the unique cultures of our state, agency, even current leadership, Do we have a lot of team members that have been around for 40 years? Or do we have high attrition rates and people, even good attrition? And our agency is largely made up of people that have been here for less than 5. Because even if you take the same concept like shared service model, how we implement it will have to look very differently based off of those particular agencies, which kind of leads to my second point. So first, figure out how you can apply it. What are the unique needs of your area? The second thing I'd say is really think through that change management piece. Really think through, and it was alluded to several times today, the stakeholder management, all the key players involved. Where are they at with buy-in on the changes we're trying to make? You can have the best idea in the world. You can walk away from this. You can consult with anybody that can help you get the information you need. You can have all the right answers. Next, you have to actually implement it. And then you have to get them to actually want to keep it and sustain it even after some of the key leadership leaves. That's the key of that sustained leadership is think through the change management. Who do you need on board? Do you need some kind of sponsorship? Do we have, and let's have an honest conversation. Do we have some people that maybe are not very supportive of this effort? If that's the case, what are we going to do to mitigate that risk? So that'd be my 2 big things is what does it mean for your particular environment, but also what considerations, what are we going to do to ensure sustainable change management so that the solutions we came up with stay in place.
Thank you, Matt. And certainly everything you said, very, very relevant. But I really appreciate you bringing up the buy-in from the employee level as well as the culture, especially in the midst of a global health pandemic, certainly, and changes our concepts as well. Jeff, what are your thoughts about scaling and innovation?
And I just want to say again, Kristen, that very logical, but never saw it kind of portrayed like that. So thank you for that. You know, we all learn on these things. 2 things. One of the things we've adopted, and when we help clients with their transformations, we don't go so deep into what currently is the problem. We look at where do you want to go, right? We know a lot of stuff is, you know, and our clients don't spend enough time on vision and really what is it you want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, whatever it is, and what we call a target operating model. I think to scale, you got to kind of know where you want to be at various points, put together some kind of roadmap. And then work towards that, you know, incremental gains. And I think the second thing is, I'll go to the change management, right? When you do that right, you engage the people and you make it real for them. They're more likely to implement it. And to be honest with you, they're going to have a lot of the great ideas themselves. So the more they're engaged, the more they're going to own it. And I think you're going to have a better result.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Kristen, we'll let you wrap up this part of our conversation.
Well, just emphasize change management. The goal is so important. Operational excellence, any of these things are means to an end. And it's so easy to start these without having clarity. And I think actually clarity and focus are the 2 most difficult things we need to do in our workspace. But to get really clear on what it is we're trying to achieve and having the stakeholders be part of that. And the sponsorship is huge. We had a governor here that's incredibly supportive, but the clarity is really hard. What are we doing with an operational excellence initiative? Are we trying to bend the cost curve in certain areas? Are we trying to absorb a growing population with no more resources? Where are our quality problems that we want to change? We've got to be really clear on that. And Jeff alluded to that, so I appreciate it. 2 other things. Focus on what you can control. I had the fortunate position of being in the governor's office. Other people say, well, I don't have access to my cabinet member, or maybe you are a cabinet member. Start with what you have control over. You may run a team, you may run a program, and start with getting really good with what you already have stewardship over, because your circle of influence expands when you show you can make a difference with what you already own. So start with what you have. I mean, if you're at a place where like Matt is, where you can just scale a whole thing, like go for it. But if you're not, start with what you can control and learn and show people, don't just tell them. And finally, get some early wins. If you are in the scalable thing, we can spend a lot of time setting up performance management systems and structure and infrastructure with no actual impact. And so as you consider that, also think about where can you get early wins? Where do you have champions who are going to get on board quickly so you can get some momentum going while you work through the change management, because the change management is never ending. So make sure you get some early wins in the process. So there's some thoughts.
Fantastic. Great nuggets across the board. So let's drill down one more step. What one action item which each of you give states on today's call that they can take now? Very first, if you want to call it the low-hanging fruit, but what's one key action step that you would suggest? They go back to their teams, have a conversation, and start. So Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would have to echo what Kristen just said, is determine why you want to do this stuff. It is a considerable investment. Many would argue it's just part of doing business, is looking for cost efficiencies, but generally there's some kind of program, initiative, even if it's a leader who's just kind of championing in their local area. The question I always ask first is why? Why do you want to do this? Because there's going to be some hardships. And when hardships come across, when you come across those, you're going to need to remind yourself and your team of the why, whatever it is. Like Chris was talking about, is it financial savings? Is that what drives you? What about improved customer satisfaction? Just the user experience. What if it is improved relationships with other agencies? If you're in one of the support agencies like administrative service or OCIO or something like this, maybe you're in an agency that works really closely with the federal level and you just want to be able to have mirrored operations with them, some kind of collaboration on operations. But whatever the case is, just really figure out and be able to clearly articulate what your objective is. Because once you have that, you can reverse engineer everything else. You can look at the end goal first and kind of work your way back to where you are. And as I think Geoffrey was talking about, setting up key specific milestones towards those goals. That'd be my number one nugget of truth.
Beautiful. I love it. Jeff, what would you like to add?
I'd say if, you could do something tomorrow, or I'll say Friday, because I think tomorrow's a holiday for most people, is get a cross section of your team together and ask them their ideas. Say, we want to do a few things. Maybe it's be more efficient. Maybe it's save money. Give us your ideas, because they have ideas, and don't just do it with a management team. Do it from whatever the entry level is to the top, and get some ideas from them. Because I think they have some of the best ideas. There's something in their job they don't like the way they do it, and they've been saying, I can do it. So that's an easy thing you can literally do. And then you can apply all the things we're doing. But I think that goes into what Matthew said, is the why you're doing it. Well, because our own team is identifying these things. These aren't just coming top down. I think when they come grassroots, they tend to be more sustainable.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very concrete. And Kristen, we'll let you wrap us up this afternoon.
Okay. I always encourage people to start by stopping. Again, our biggest constraint is our own time and attention. And we have massive to-do lists, massive things to start. And if we give our teams the space to be candid with us about, are we solving real problems for real people with measurable impact? Right? And if there's this big long chain of causality, if we do this and down the road, maybe this, if we're not really clear on the problem we're solving for the customer we serve, put it in a parking lot. And when you just make a list and you let everyone just put up in one place everything that they're carrying, everything we've asked them to do, it's a little overwhelming. And if we want space for improvement, it starts by saying, you know what, as a leader or as a team member, I'm going to give my team some breathing room. Let's talk about what we can put on hold so we can create the space to focus on what we think is really going to move things forward.
Fantastic. Excellent words across the board. Thank all three of you so much for joining us today. Just my sincere gratitude to Matt, to Jeff, and to Kristen for sharing your thought leadership with all the NASCA members. We come together as a collaborative group, as your national agency, to really bring this information to you and share concepts and strategies, innovation, new opportunities to grow across the board. So again, thank you to all of our panelists today. We'll be back together on December 8th for our next top 10 for December, looking at data management and analytics, and having an optional kind of on-demand opportunity for you to hear another recorded event around diversity, equity, and inclusion in procurement. So 2 more top 10 activities coming up before the end of the calendar year. And then we'll be kicking off our 2022 top 10 in early January. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today for NASCA's national webinar around our top 10 events. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.